Welcome to the O Show, your number one podcast for everything training, mindset, and nutrition. I am your host, Odhran McCarry, and it is my goal to help you access the best information around to allow you to kick ass in the gym, in the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. Between my own experiences and those of my amazing guests, I'm confident we will do that. So let's strap in and level up your life starting right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's episode of the O Show. I am your host, Odhran McCarry, and today I have on one of Australia's top bikini coaches. He coaches a lot of girls in different divisions. It's Mr. Troy Thornton. How are you today, Troy?
Oh, very well. Thank you for having me on, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a while coming. I was just explaining to you that I listened to you on a different podcast when I was doing cardio one day during my shoot prep last year, and I just thought, like, you've got a lot to talk about. I think it was a long episode as well, that one that I listened to, and I messaged you, but we just haven't been able to hook it up till now. So this will be episode 3 of the new series. So it's a big name to start us off. And actually, whenever I invited you on, you shared it, and a lot of people followed me, and I was like, hey, how'd you find out about me? They're like, oh, I work with Troy, or I seen Troy posted it and I just want to follow along. So I think this one will go down quite well as well, because it's yeah, you garner a lot of attention on social media, so it should be a good one.
Definitely. It's a pleasure to be on, and I always enjoy being on other people's podcasts to talk about anything. So I always say that I'm open book, and I think most people should be, looking to really be a bit more transparent in the industry as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, maybe, because obviously you mainly coach bikini competitors. How did you get into the industry, and what made you decide to go all in on bikini? Whereas most people maybe coach a bit of bodybuilding, men's physique, you just went all in on that one category. Why was that, and how did you get started?
So I've been in the industry for a while. I mean, I competed first back in 2010. It was a junior bodybuilding competition. It was a natural federation, A and B, here in Australia. Yeah. And I just did the Victorian show, and I did nationals. So that was my first taste of bodybuilding, and I enjoyed it. I thought I wanted to sort of pursue bodybuilding for a while. I worked in the gym. I worked at the Arnold Sports Festival, which is really cool. So obviously the Arnold's not going forward now with COVID-19, but that was a really good experience. So I've been around the industry for a while and connected with, natural bodybuilders, and obviously going into the IFBB. Never competed in the IFBB, but because I worked at the Arnold, I had good connections, been on the judging panel, that type of thing. So I've always been in the industry. I've always had a really good knowledge with coaching. I was a PT. What was that since? I would say 2011, 2010, 2011, either one. Probably actually was the year after I competed. I believe I started personal training, and I didn't really like doing so much lifestyle PTing. I always enjoyed the contest prep side of things, having gone through that experience myself. And at that point in time, I was doing both male and female. So it wasn't like I was exclusive to one. I never really committed and went all in on that because I was PTing, and I didn't really I probably underestimated the market at that point in time. And back then we didn't have Instagram. It was more so Facebook. And I didn't think the marketing was as strong to get that attention, to get eyes on you as a coach. So I think, moving forward to, creating this, going into the niche of bikini, I noticed that, social media, a lot of influencers were pushing out products like, I want to get a sponsorship with Right-Away. I want to get a sponsorship with some sort of apparel company or supplements. That's what a lot of people were doing, and they were getting paid to do that. And I thought, why can't I, sort of reverse engineer that and create something focused towards contest prepping? There was a few people at the time that said there was a gap in the market for, just general contest prep coaching, and specifically female coaching. And I thought I might look into it because I was still doing it part-time. So even when I was working at the Arnold, I was doing marketing and sales there. I was still sort of prepping people on the side. It was always something that I found interesting, but I never committed to doing it full-time. And even back when I was PTing, because I had a lot of lifestyle clients working in the gym, then I went to the Arnold Sports Festival. I just didn't have that full-time mentality. When the opportunity came up and I saw a gap in the market, I noticed that there was no one in Australia that really focused on female-specific contest prep or even just female bodybuilding. There's a standard that I liked. I mean, looking at the IFBB point of view, there wasn't really one standout coach. The WBFF have a few different coaches, but there was definitely a gap in the market. And I thought, I know what I'm doing. Let's just roll with it and go all in. And there was a few people at the time that definitely contributed to that decision. That gave me that, say, hey, listen, you can do this. You've got the knowledge. You just got to put it out there. And I thought, fuck it, let's just do it.
Nice. And I remember the first time I heard your name mentioned, because I moved over here in January 2018, and started working at Doherty's in Perth in February. So obviously I knew Renee and I knew Jay Kennedy as well. And at one stage, just before Renee started working with you, Jay said to me, "Oh, Renee's going to start working with a new coach and it's going to be next level." And I was like, "Who?" And he was like, "Oh, it's a big secret." So I kind of created this like mystique. I don't think it had been fully agreed, but Renee must have told that you were chatting or whatever. I was like, "Who's this Troy guy then?" And then what happened, I think first year or first season working together, she ended up getting her pro card, I think. I might be wrong with it.
No, that's right. So I remember seeing her at the Arnold actually, and I was working backstage, and Jay, and actually I think I actually flew over to the Doherty's Perth opening day.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I met Renee in the posing room, and Jay was there helping her go through some poses. And I know that's changed a lot now. Renee's like, you know, the queen of posing.
Yeah,
and I was looking at her going, wow, she's actually really good. And I thought, this is interesting. I'm like, she gets in shape, she's going to do really well at the Arnold. At the Arnold, I believe that year, she was in the top call out, placed 6th, didn't place well at the qualifying show in WA. But I seen her backstage and I thought, wow, I reckon this woman can get a pro card. And I said that to her. And then I think Jay was probably like, obviously encouraged Renee to go with me, because I've been friends with Jay for a while and I've always had that knowledge and he knows that, but I've never really committed to it. At the time, I was very picky with who I wanted to work with or wanted to help, because I was doing it for fun. I wasn't, you know, creating a business out of it. It was just something that I'd like to do. And yeah, I just seen Renee and I thought, wow, like she's super impressive. She can be really good. We selected a show, which was the all-female classic, which was the next pro qualifier that was available. And yeah, she prepped for the show and won it straight away.
Nice. And that's, I remember I've listened to a podcast. I'm not sure who it was. I think it might have been when Scott Goble used to do his podcast, and he said, or either that or the Aussie Muscle Asylum. I think it was Scott's podcast though. And they said that whenever Renee came out for that show, it was like lights out, like she had the perfect, everything just flowed nicely for that pro card win. So that's a huge compliment where it's like, you know, clear winner as a result of the first season of coaching. So that's a big feather in the cap there, buddy. But you've also expanded the team a lot since then. Like that's when I think you were sort of starting to get recognized as a bikini coach, and it's grown over the past 2 years then. So is that just as a result of you going all in, do you think, or is it certain caliber of athletes you've got on, or is it the marketing? What's made you sort of blow up as this bikini coach over the past 2 years then?
I think it's a combination of everything. So it's definitely marketing. So you need to show off the athletes that you have and be proud of them. I think it all stems from having a passion and that desire. So it's like, if you have an end goal, it's like, what is that goal? Like, what do you want to achieve? And for me, when I decided to go full time, I was like, I want to be the best coach in Australia, like handling, you know, bikini competitors. It's like, there's no question in my mind that it's going to happen. So I committed to that idea. And even though at the time I committed to that idea, I wasn't comfortable saying it out loud because I knew that I wasn't. So I had a lot to prove and I wanted to be that person. So I think making the commitment to being that person and wanting to be that person was everything. And then everything else falls into place. It's like, I didn't have a game plan how to get there. I didn't know how to get there, but I was like, I'm prepared to do the work. I'm prepared to network, to speak to clients and to put in effort with not just my Golden Girl clients, but the clients that are up and coming that no one's ever seen. And then creating, you know, ladies from scratch, which is even more fun than sort of working with someone, you know, like Renee, although Renee actually never won a contest at that point in time where I worked with her. But the difference is that she had the physique. So I didn't really build it from scratch. Like she, you know, had really good development, just needed the right coach to fine tune things to get her in condition. So, but marketing is very important, but I think it all stems back to having that desire to be the best and whatever that goal is and going all in for that. So some people can resonate to that goal of theirs. That might be, hey, listen, I want to win the Western Australian title. I want to win a Victorian title. I want to win an Australian title. And you don't know how to get there. You may not think that you're the best at the moment, but once you commit to that idea and you do everything you need to do to get there, like you'll realize how quick it can come.
Yeah. And most people who are listening to this will probably know about bikini, but you get two sides of the fence where some people say bikini's so hard to judge, we don't know what they're looking for. And then you get people like yourself, you're like, no, it's pretty clear what they're looking for. We just need to bring it to stage. So what, in your opinion, is the perfect bikini look on stage that people should be aiming for? Like, how do you want your athletes to be presenting on the day?
I think that the most important thing is developing proportion. So if you've got really big glutes, that doesn't automatically mean that you're going to win a contest. And if you're on condition, you want to have big glutes, you know, with good quads that balance out the glutes, that balance the hamstrings and calves. It's all about proportion. So bodybuilding, you know, if you look at the men's side of things, you still want to have someone that's symmetrically pleasing, has really good flow and proportion. It's even more important with bikini competitors. So if you've got a lady that walks out that's got amazing legs, really small waist, but lacks that V taper up the top, that doesn't have that balance, you're probably not going to do very well. So it's about completing your physique. So I look at things from the point of view where I need to complete ladies' physiques and have the smallest waist possible. So if you can achieve that, complement that with really good posing and conditioning, you know, you're going to do well. So with all the competitors that I have, I look at timelines and say, all right, what is the goal that you want to achieve? You know, is that goal achievable in a timeline that we have right now? Meaning, can we do season B? Oh, okay, we need a bit more size. Let's do season A. So I'm realistic with the ladies with their goals as well and their expectations. And I try to make sure that we're planning, you know, for their future success. So some ladies will say, look, I want a pro card for season B. What do you think? And I'll put them in a category of, look, it's actually possible. But these are the competitors that are in the mix. We need to put some size on. We need to work on your posing. This is the realistic side of things. So I think it's about, you know, figuring out individual work ethic, setting a goal, and then implementing a plan and making sure that they execute well.
Yeah, fair enough. And then in terms of, because you've done that segment on your stories probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where you were like, okay, let's look at seeing person's physiques and see which one will be favored better by the judges, right? Or which was better conditioning. So how do you develop that eye, and sort of how do you know what the judges are looking for? When you look at a lineup, for example, how do you know who the judges are going to gravitate towards 1, 2, 3 versus the rest of the call out?
Yeah, it's interesting because every judge has a certain look that they like, I would say. So let's say, for example, if the NPC judges over in the States, they definitely reward conditioning. So the conditioning requirements for the NPC in the States, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is completely different from what's rewarded in Australia. And that's with, you know, that's what I see. It's like, we can't argue that if, for example, you know, the state show winners, the overall title, they're coming in really full, probably not as conditioned. And you look at what's happening overseas, and some people will say, oh, it's the, you know, it's the best available. You know, that's the athlete, that's the best available on the day. That's got the combination of symmetry, size, proportion, posing, etc. But that's not the case. So Australian judges definitely reward a fuller look, which means not just fuller in musculature and like carbing up, it's also more body fat. The NPC look is a bit more conditioned. So if you look at the Olympia, the top 5 of the Olympia, they're all pretty peeled, you know, or very close to. And if someone is not peeled in that top 5 lineup, peeled for bikini, then they're probably going to slip a few places. That's what we're seeing with Angelica just at the recent Olympia, right? Now, certain judges I'll know, like, for example, if something's judged in Victoria, I already know what the head judge there likes in terms of, you know, his overall look, which he likes, like I said, a fuller look. So you're probably going to have to carb up properly in Victoria. Like, you don't want to come in too stringy and too lean. He's not going to like that. So I already know that that's going to happen. And different states will have different looks because certain judges, like, I mean, I have my favorite type of physique as well. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that, you know, one judge has a certain look over another. I have my preferences too. And that's what makes a judging panel very interesting and subjective. But I just think that if you've got the best combination of posing, proportion, shape, symmetry, size, like, everything needs to be there, and you can sort of outweigh certain things. So I'll know at the Olympia, for example, you've got to be in condition or you're not even looked at for a top 3 placing. You know, if your posing's not there, you're probably not going to be in the top 3 either. Whereas in Australia, they're looking for more fullness. Still need to be in condition. They're not completely ignoring condition. You still have to be a conditioned athlete, but it's not to the same level that it would be, not just even at the Olympia, but at an NPC local show where you're getting a pro card. So you just got to be strategic with what you bring in terms of the overall look. But for me, without justifying bullshit, just, you know, like, I can say, oh, I brought someone in softer because that's what they're looking for. That's a load of shit, right? You want to bring in someone as hard as possible for that category that they're going to be rewarded, and bring them in as full as possible. So that's always my goal.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you find that balance of getting them peeled enough, but full enough, plus potentially like not so peeled that they're going to get marked down at the same time, if they do have this skewed sort of for each different state, right? Like,
Yeah. So I think that, because I've got the advantage because I've worked with so many ladies that are really in the mix, that are going to be like placing well in the open or placing well on the pro card, or they're really good pros. Because I have so many that I'm dieting down, I can sort of I can compare them between each other and go, okay, they're probably a little bit ahead. These two ladies are a bit more conditioned than the next two. And I'm bringing them all in for the same show. So I can bring them in that same level of conditioning. There's always going to be someone that's the hardest out of the team. But I've got that advantage that I can sort of compare off the number of 5 or 10 competitors where other coaches can't do that. So I'm always bringing in the competitors around that same level, or if not, that's the goal.
Okay. And then something you said earlier, mate, which I wrote down, was about the flow and proportion when you're looking to balance everything. The glutes have to be proportionate to the quads and the hamstrings and calves. The upper body, it's the same, right? You need to have nice cap delts and a little bit of a taper. How do you program that sort of thing then? Have you got any sort of hard and fast rules about what you don't do, what you do, what do you like for certain muscle groups? What way do you approach that?
So everything's definitely time and attention. So you'll have a lot of people that might argue that, let's say, progressive overload's, the most important factor. It is a factor. I don't think it's number one. The number one thing is that you have to have a really good mind and muscle connection. So that could mean lifting less explosive and just having a tempo that's controlled. So you're controlling the negative. You're not lifting explosive out of the bottom. It could be, let's say 50% explosive. So like, if you're going to, the 5 out of 10 is like half speed, 10 out of 10 is full speed, maybe lifting from a 5, 6 or 7 out of 10. So it's under control. You're not lifting explosive where you're throwing weight around. Because I find that unless they're an experienced lifter, it's going to be very challenging for ladies to have that mind and muscle connection. And it's easy to chase PR, like different numbers, right? In the gym. So I'm doing a barbell hip thrust for 160 kilos, but it's not effective if you're using your hips and you're using a lot of lower back and you're throwing the weight around. I'd rather someone use 100 kilos or 80 kilos, execute properly, hold and squeeze, control the negative and feel it all in the glutes and have less strain on their lower back, their core, and they're checking the ego at the gym. It's just sort of like for us guys, like I remember when I first started bodybuilding, I had no chest. I trained like a power lifter. And one of the things that I found was I was controlling the negative. I was lifting really good. I was more explosive lifting back then, but I didn't really have a strong mind and muscle connection. And that mind and muscle connection came from a lot of isometric squeezing, a lot of actual bodybuilding posing. I found like my mind and muscle connection improved as I was posing as a bodybuilder. And it was actually after my first show where I created that really good mind and muscle connection. I didn't even know what the hell that was at the time. And I found that because I was always squeezing different muscle groups when I was posing, that actually helped my mind and muscle connection to develop weaker body parts. So I think slowing things down and really focusing on that connection is the number one thing that I would recommend for anyone, regardless of division, and then training something probably a little bit more frequently. So looking at weaker body parts 2 or 3 times a week. For the dudes, you've got to be careful because if you're lifting really heavy, you're probably going to need more recovery time. But for the lady category, 2 to 3 times a week on weaker body parts for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And that's pretty much all body parts then. So like glutes, quads, you count that as separate body parts? Would you do like a glutes for a set amount of sets through the week and quads for a set amount, or what way do you split that up with the frequency?
It just depends on their proportion. So if someone's severely lacking quads, then I'm going to give them a lot more volume and frequency than someone that has pretty decent quad development. So I'm designing things on programming based on their silhouette, their proportion and flow. So if someone doesn't have really good quads to balance out their upper body, I'm like, okay, we need to bash the shit out of the quads. But at the same time, you got to make sure that if the goal is to hit them with high frequency, if it's 3 times a week, then we've got to be careful with the volume to make sure that they recover so they're able to train every second day. So that needs to be monitored to the individual. And it's also like, everything's individual to the client. So some clients are just going to go in and absolutely crush their session, hold and squeeze everything, really control the negative and be methodical in what they do in their execution. And you have some clients that will just go through the motions, and then you can probably program them a little bit more volume because they're not as intense. So it really needs to be catered to the level of athlete that you're working with and, their level of intensity and obviously their recovery.
Okay, awesome. And something you said earlier, Troy, was about the time under tension, that overload still is important, right? So how often, if they're focused on this mind muscle connection, more frequent lifts, how often are you suggesting that they would progress those lifts, or when do they progress the lifts? Is there a set parameter?
So I would say that, once they've got that mind and muscle connection down and they're achieving, let's call it a pump in the gym, I would say that if they can lift something with, let's say the rep range is 8 to 12 and they're hitting 12 for 4 sets, if that's the actual exercise, if they're doing that comfortably and it's not challenging, then bump the weight. Sometimes the challenge becomes, there's always sort of like an endpoint. If you're doing a barbell hip thrust, like how heavy can you go, right? So I would rather probably add in some intensity principles rather than focus on progressive overload if the weight is becoming an issue where form's compromised. So if, for example, someone's doing 100 kilos, let's say for 12 reps for 4 sets, they could go up to 105, they could go up to 110, provided that they're using the same tempo and form. If their form's not compromised, and they can continue that progressive overload for the week. So it's just a matter of that athlete challenging themselves. Sometimes I'll find where, let's say that athlete that's gone from 100 kilos has gone up to all the way to 140. They can hit that rep range, but they're not getting that minor muscle connection. I will then say that's too heavy because they've lost that connection. They might be using hips. They might be using a bit more lower back. The range of motion could be different. So that needs to be monitored in terms of, like, let's say someone should always record their videos when they're training and look back at their form. And then how was that 100 kilo barbell hip thrust executed versus that 140? And if it's the same, then awesome. But there's obviously a reason why they're losing that minor muscle connection. And I think that's probably the number one thing that's really important for athletes that aren't that experienced as well. Because obviously, as you are more experienced, most ladies do have a good minor muscle connection.
Yeah, 100%, man. And if people don't understand what you said before about the intensity principles rather than overloading, what specifically do you like to use? Is it rest pause? Is it drop sets? What would you do to make that set more intense?
Yeah, I'll use everything for a newbie. But I would probably say more drop sets, because at least that is going to create that burn in the muscle where they can feel that minor muscle connection. It's like, oh, I can feel my glutes pumped. Yeah. Once they sort of progress through that, then rest pause is very, very good. It's probably my number one principle that I really like, but that would only be beneficial for someone that has a strong minor muscle connection that won't break form. Because if they're hitting, let's say they're doing 8 reps for their first, set, then they're doing a rest pause, and all of a sudden they compromise form for that rest pause set, and they might do 5 reps when really they should have done 3 with perfect execution, and defeats the purpose. So, you need to be that methodical, and the goal in the gym should be to fail the muscle as fast as possible, not to do as many reps as possible. So if they're thinking, I need to do as many reps in this rest pause, it defeats the purpose of that lift. So I'd rather them hold and squeeze like their life depends on it, really exhaust that muscle, and then they're good to go. And obviously a rest pause in that case would be really beneficial. But drop sets is probably the best thing for newbies to create that pump and that minor muscle connection.
Yeah. And then let's talk a tiny bit more about programming in terms of, for example, you have a few girls over here. I know you prepped Catherine for the recent season. So somebody who's at that level, like sort of really good competitor, have you got a sort of average like set number you get them to do, or is there a maximum minimum that you normally like them to do? Say, for example, they wanted to bring their glutes up. Is there a set amount of glutes you'd like to have people do, or how do you distinguish that, how much to put in?
Yeah, it depends on their recovery and the amount of food they're on as well. So like Catherine, I like to give her, sometimes I'll give her a really high volume. So something like seven exercises, yep. Right? And there's times where I've given her a little bit less. So I'll go to 6 exercises. Some clients even get 5. 5 exercises would be the minimum, but I'm a big fan of high volume, high frequency. So as long as they're recovering, I also find that the more often you do a movement, the better you're going to get at it as well. And that also helps that minor muscle connection. And obviously if you're doing a barbell hip thrust 3 times a week, in 3 months time, provided that you've been doing it correctly in week 1, the execution of that lift in 3 months time is going to be awesome. So that minor muscle connection is going to be there, which is going to help. But I'm a big fan of high frequency, high volume. So let's say, in general, 5 to 7 exercises on a leg day would be beneficial, but I'm more on the 7 exercises side of things.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So anything in that sort of range, depending on exactly what they need then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. And then Troy, what about diet for females? Have you got any sort of hard and fast rules around stuff you like to do? Do you like carbon around your workouts, carb backloading? Do you like fasting? What have you got any sort of general things you like that most work for most people?
Yeah, so I definitely listen to what the athlete's needs are as well. Some of my ladies do like fasting. I'm not a big fan of that, but I do listen to people's needs as well. So I will take that into consideration to make changes if I need to, and go, all right, cool, let's do fasting till 12 o'clock because that's what you're used to doing, and let's roll with that. And I figure out a game plan around that. But if I had my way of things at all times, I would strongly recommend a high carb, moderate fat approach with medium to high protein. So I'm not a fan of having too much fats, provided that there is a point in time where you can only eat so many carbs in the off season. If you're having 450 grams of carbs plus, you're going to have adequate fat with that. So some ladies on the team, like I'll have, for example, there's one competitor that comes to mind in her off season. She's over 600 grams of carbs. Her fats are obviously going to increase because I can't just keep giving her carbs. It's going to get, she's going to get sick of eating. Like no one wants to do that. It's a full-time job. So, but generally speaking, a lower to moderate fat approach is always best. And I have that same approach when it comes to being in a deficit. Carbs around training always, even in a deficit. So pre and post workout, I like having carbs quite high, even if they're on low carbs. I just think that works really well. If ladies in a deficit are struggling to lose weight, then I'll change around. Possibly, I might even take away, post-workout carbs, take out pre-workout carbs, but add it back in. So I just need to monitor what's going on and see what changes need to be made. And I'll try different things every now and then, but I like to have carbs in at all meals. Generally, the last meal, I can take carbs away. It's not so important of the day.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And what about like flexible diet? Is that something you do, or do all your girls work off a meal plan?
No, so I have a few ladies on macros. That's not definitely my selection. So yeah, I've got a few girls that just prep recently that got in decent condition on macros, but I always find that there's too many variables to consider, like artificial sweeteners. Like for example, if you're having Monster drink every day, it's going to affect your gut health. I find that the ladies that do have these food sources included don't lose at the same rate where, someone's having bro diet, like just plain bodybuilding food. And that's just what I've seen with a lot of competitors. But at the same time, if a lady does feel like she wants to diet on macros and that's going to keep her compliant, then I'll always say, yes, let's do macros. So it's about compliance, their lifestyle, and obviously their mentality as well. If someone's want to go all in, Troy, what do I want to, I'll do anything to be the best. What's it going to take to get in the best condition possible? I say, let's go on a shit diet. Let's eat boring food. That's the answer. But the problem is that no one wants to say it and go, oh, you can get in shape on macros. Yeah, you can, but it's going to be fucking hard because the rate of loss isn't the same. And I've got many examples of ladies on the team. Nicole Tan's actually one of them. Whenever she diets, her rate of loss is very, very slow. So you might lose half a kilo a week. It's not linear. It's just the progress is definitely slower. But obviously, she likes to enjoy different food sources. And Nicole Tan always gets peeled. So her conditioning is never an issue. But the journey, the process is a little bit different to someone that's eating very clean food. So you got to work with the athlete and what fits their lifestyle. And like I said, compliance is everything. So if they're going to be compliant having a Pepsi Max every day and they want to have, a little bit of ice cream for the last meal of the day, then sure, let's do that. It's better than them cheating. Yeah.
And that's quite interesting because without going into specifics around the code, because obviously it's personal, but why do you feel that certain people get slowed down by flexible approach? Because you got people who argue that, as long as you're in the calorie deficit, it doesn't matter what you eat. So you've got that camp, and then you've got the people who say, no, the bro diet's better. So why do you feel, or what do you think about the girls you've anecdotally worked with? Why has it slowed them down in particular?
I think digestion is very important. So let's go, for example, to the extreme side of things. If, for example, you were to drink a liter of milk a day, do you think that's going to be more beneficial than having a cleaner sources of food? Or you're just going to go crazy on the lactose? Like, I think we both can agree that a liter of milk a day versus that exact same, macronutrient breakdown in clean sources is going to be more beneficial for digestion. So, when you have a lot of sugar, I also feel like that's definitely not the same thing. You're also looking at nutrient density as well. Is what you're having, going to be beneficial and hit those numbers? But most of the time when ladies are on macros, they're not thinking nutrient dense foods as well. And we're also looking at fiber. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration, but gut health and digestion is probably the most important thing. I find that ladies that are on macros always have digestion problems, especially when they go into a deficit. I find macros in the off season is not as bad. Digestibility isn't really a concern, but for whatever reason, when you are holding on to body fat, the body changes, and the ability to digest certain food sources isn't the same as it is in the off season. I don't know why that is. I'm not sure exactly what the reason for it is, but I see it all the time. And I think that slows things down. So hormonally, there's something going on, and digestion wise, there's something definitely going on.
Okay. And if you suspected that, you know, it was either hormonally or digestion issues, like what would be the steps that the average person could take outside of, you know, well, the simplest way, I guess, is to remove what the potential things are. But would you run blood panels, or would you do anything more extensive with doctors in that case where you think it's a serious issue? Or
if there's a serious issue, because sometimes it could be something like, you know, a thyroid disease, right? Like, and that has happened to me before. I'm like trying to question, I'm like, what are the food sources we're having? You know, your process of elimination, you start taking out food sources, you look at things. There's certain food sources that I do red flag, that I look at and go, okay, let's take these out straight away. And like, for example, something like broccoli, if you're having vegetables, I find that creates some inflammation in the stomach. Definitely when you're dieting, there's certain foods that I find that are easy to digest. So attacking those first would be a good idea. Process of elimination, and then monitoring if you're having a certain meal and if you feel like digestion's a bit off an hour after, 2 hours after, or what time of the day is there an issue? How are your stools looking when you open your bowels as well? If your bowels are consistent, then you're good to go. Energy as well. I find, for example, with myself, because I don't have the best diet, I notice when I do have foods that are a bit harder to digest, my bowels aren't looking as good. So the stools are a little bit looser. I notice there's a lack of energy as well. I find that my general energy improves as my digestion improves and as my bowel consistency is there. So having the right food sources to make sure that that's consistent, and monitoring that would be the first step. And then you can look at doing blood work and looking at doing allergy tests as well after that. But generally speaking, most people don't need to do that. Just look at some basic food sources. Process of elimination is the first thing to look at.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. It's the easiest way to do it. And then, like you said, they can get into the other options. And Troy, one thing I wanted to talk about before we finish up as well is PEDs. I know we said at the start, I never filter these episodes. I let anyone talk about what they want. And you said you're comfortable talking about females taking drugs. So let's go down that route. Are drugs potentially the cause of a physique not reaching its potential, or are they there to make it better? Is some things overdone or wrongly done? What's your opinion around that? And because it can be pretty prevalent in bikini girls now, right? Or they're taking the wrong stuff, or they're not doing, or they're basically just doing what their boyfriend does, right? Which isn't smart moves, right? Yeah,
definitely not a good idea. I think, look, whenever you take anything, there's always a risk. There's a risk to reward ratio. So you need to consider that. You know, I do think that a lot of ladies probably rush it and they go into it too early. So if you are considering it, I think take your time, build a natural physique first, build a really good foundation. Most ladies don't understand that you can build a lot of muscle being in a calorie surplus for a year to 2 years. You can build a very good bikini physique. I just think that a lot of ladies aren't prepared to do that. They aren't prepared to be in a surplus and be disciplined, you know, in the off season, because they want to drink, they want to be social, and, you know, they might miss a meal here or there. So it's about consistency and effort. So I think everything needs to go back to the goal. It's like, what do you want to achieve? And, you know, what's important to you, you know, in the timeline. So if I want it now, I'm probably going to take drugs. That's, I think, the mentality that a lot of ladies do have, the ones that do cross over. In terms of reaching their potential, you know, you're always going to be able to put on more muscle, and you're going to be recovering a lot quicker if you're going down the PED route. So, you know, there are ladies that do compete at a high level naturally, and they're the ones that have been in a surplus and they have been in the sport for a long time, where they've been eating up and they're very disciplined and committed, more so than the other ladies. I can pick it out very quickly, but I do think for the most part, most ladies go into it too soon. In terms of, you know, what I recommend, I always say stay natural. I think it's the better thing in the long run. If you look at, you know, the level of muscle that's needed in bikini, it is achievable naturally. The conditioning side of things, again, that takes some time, but I think most people want to stay too lean. They don't want to put the hard work in to go into a calorie surplus and to do it. Like, looking at even just recent results, I've got a couple competitors that competed that use PEDs for nationals, and I have a few ladies that are natural as well. The couple of ladies that are natural, it was interesting. They actually put on a lot of muscle in their off season. The difference between the ones that took and the ones that didn't wasn't that extreme in terms of how much muscle they had. And I think that was really based on the work ethic of the natural competitors. That doesn't mean all natural competitors are going to have a shitload of muscle, because that's not the case. There is a definite advantage. I'm going to be very clear with what I say here. There is a definite advantage with the ladies that do take PEDs, but I do think that most ladies that probably take their foot off the pedal.
Yeah.
You know, they're not as intense. I remember when I was, for example, when I was a natural bodybuilder, back when I said like I was competing A and B, I'm not natural anymore. Although I'm not even taking training seriously anymore, I should say. But when I did crossover, I took my foot off the pedal. The results came so much quicker, and I was just not as intense. And I'm like, wow, this is so easy. I don't even have to diet that hard. I don't have to worry about being in a surplus all the time. Like, I don't have to be mindful of counting every macronutrient, which is exactly what I did when I was natural. I was insane. For like a period of 2 years, I didn't like miss a macro. Like, I was crazy. As soon as I went to the dark side, I was like, I'll just have this, I'll have that. I stopped sort of putting food into my calorie count. I was very lazy with things. So, but yeah, PEDs does have an advantage. I think ladies need to be very careful with what they use if they are using things. If you are going to consider it, you know, always start modestly. So I'd strongly recommend to get a coach that does know what they're doing. And how do you find that? If a coach says for you to use a boatload of shit, they're probably really retarded. So let's just like use logic and go, all right, if I'm going to, for example, recommend a competitor to use something, it's more than likely going to be half a tablet to start off with. Like, use some common sense. This is your first time. Low dose is the way to go. If you are going to cross over, as soon as you start having multiple tablets, using multiple different drugs, all of a sudden you're becoming a drug baron. That's not what bikini is. It's not something that you should be doing. You want to have a feminine look. As soon as you have a masculine look to your physique and to your face, you're losing that bikini look. You're moving into other categories, and not even other categories, because you can maintain really good femininity with other categories. But I do think that, you know, there is pressure for ladies on social media as well. It's a big problem to use PEDs and to use large amounts, because I've seen some, you know, dosages recommended from other coaches or just from people, you know, boyfriends or people in the gym, that's really retarded. So, you know, if in doubt, and if you really want to use, you can send me a question. I'll answer it. No bullshit, but just go half a tablet if it's your first time. Like, that's probably the easiest thing to do. And more often than not, half a tablet's the way to go consistently. Like, you should not use more than than a full tablet if you're in bikini category, like, period. There's just no point. And if you are, you're probably just trying to rush the process. And if you've done that, that's fine. Just back it off the next time and just take a longer off season to build the size that you want, instead of taking 2 or 3 tablets. Because I've seen and heard of ladies taking multiple things, and yeah, it's quite insane what I've seen recommended. But half a tablet's probably the way to go.
Before we finish, let's talk about how insane these are. Like, what's the worst thing you've seen? Somebody either coming to you in the DM saying, hey, my coach has got me on this, or somebody who's came to you who's been like, I've been taking this, let's start coaching.
Yeah. Okay. So injecting tren.
Wow.
As a bikini competitor, and not just once. I've heard that a few times.
Wow. Okay.
Multiple times. I'm injecting tren. DECA, so specifically NPP. This person was on test in NPP, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, test prop. And that was really retarded. Multiple ladies on the thyroid hormone. So, like, I'm not a fan of anyone using T3 unless obviously they need it, depending on, you know, the endocrinologist, blood work, etc. If they're low and if they need it for life, that's okay. I'm not the one that should recommend or prescribe it. No coach should ever do that, ladies. So if your coach recommends T3 or T4, not a vibe. Definitely not recommended. That's what an endocrinologist is for. That's what checking your blood work's for. Even if your blood work is really low and your thyroid levels are low, your coach should not recommend it. Leave it up to someone that is a professional. Like, I would never recommend someone T3. That's just retarded. So that's a common thing. A lot of ladies are recommended that, not just with coaches in Australia, but overseas. But there's like stack of the gods, man. Like, I've seen, I won't say who the coach is, but I've seen from the same team, bikini girls on 7 different compounds. Wow. Yeah. Like obviously multiple anabolics, you know, thyroid hormone, anti-estrogens, multiple you know, Clan, Letro, like the worst, man. Like you should never use Letro as a bikini competitor. It's fucking retarded.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Like, you know,
as a female, it's fucking crazy.
Letro, and that's a common thing. You know, as crazy as it sounds, like diuretics, hit and miss. Like they have their place, but I would rather not. Like, let's say 90% of the time, you'd rather not use a diuretic. If someone has their period, cool, you can probably look at using a diuretic, but it needs to be monitored. And then it's like the type of diuretic that's used. Like, I think that Diazide is probably the only thing that I would ever use, and that's the only thing I have. But you've got other competitors that use mods. Not a vibe. It's not a really good idea. Aldactone is terrible. I think it's just terrible diuretic for most people anyway, just without getting into the science too much of that. But even Lasix, like what type of fucking bikini competitor uses Lasix? It's insane. So, you know, for the people out there, like, what is Lasix? It strips everything out of the body. Like, it's the most harsh diuretic imaginable. For a bikini competitor, you want to have a full feminine face. You know, if you're sucking out all the water, you're going to look like a skeleton. So that also, you know, not just flattens out your physique, but your face needs to be feminine. And as you diet down, you obviously are going to have some cheekbones coming out. But there's a difference between having a lean face and being sucked in like to the max. So I pretty much heard it all. Like as soon as I heard like the train injections, I thought that was crazy. Also ladies having primobolan, but primobolan's very, very often faked. So they're not having primo, they're probably injecting test. So it's like just things like that. You should never be injecting as a bikini competitor. I don't even think you should be injecting as a figure competitor. You know, like you just stay away from it. You want to have a timeline where you can grow in the off season. You know, don't think you need to get these results immediately if you're aiming for size. If the goal's for a pro card, take your time. Like you don't need to use a bunch of shit. And like I said, if you are considering that, be very modest with what you're doing and look at doing maximum half a tablet for your first cycle and then go from there.
Yeah, fair enough, man. And let's finish with what's next for Troy. Like what's on the cards for you coming up? How many girls have you got for season B and what's new in your world?
Yeah, so I've just been started doing a bit more WBFF, so that's cool. I've got a few ladies that are doing the WBFF show in July, so I definitely think there's probably a couple of pro cards at least for the ladies that are competing. I've only got a small bunch of competitors. That's fun for me, and yeah, for IFBB Nationals, that's going to be a really good time for me because I have some very strong competitors that I would say that I've got. Definitely 100%. I've got a competitor that can compete for an overall bikini title in every state. So if they don't win, they're definitely in the mix to win an overall. That's how good the team is for season B. So, you know, my goal is to really separate myself from every other coach in the bikini world. And with the ladies that are competing, I think that's going to be very obvious, not just at the amateur level, but also the professional level. So the pro show is going to be really interesting as well. Obviously, I'm definitely going to have a few more competitors doing that in the pro ranks. So I think that's going to be a really good result. Did you watch nationals at all?
I didn't actually. I just seen the photos on the Instagram.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I obviously I wasn't there and didn't watch the live stream, so it's kind of hard to give input. But what were we going to ask me?
I was going to say, what did you think about the results?
For the pro level or the amateurs?
Yeah, it's the pro level. Yeah.
I thought it looked pretty good. I know you had a few horses in the race in the first call out. So who did you have again? Remind me.
So I had Alex play second.
Yep.
So I had Alex in second. Steph was fourth, and then also had Jade McKee competing as well. She placed a little bit down the ladder, but I was just curious to hear if you hear your thoughts on the show if you watched it. That's all.
The thing is, I wasn't there, so I can't that old thing. If you're not there, you can't really judge. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you didn't agree with the decision, right? So Melissa won, right, and then your girl came second, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about that. What's your opinion on what maybe went wrong with the judging there, or why did you think your girl should have been up ahead of Melissa then?
I think she beat her in every pose.
Okay.
Like it wasn't close.
Okay.
Like anyone with I've spoken to people and I'm like, please be an asshole to me and tell me exactly like it is. I haven't had one person say that wasn't the case.
Okay.
You know, so The way that I look at things, and I also had some international coaches message me that aren't too friendly with me that thought that was an interesting decision. So that also gave me confidence knowing that, I'm bringing in girls in the right direction.
Yeah.
When I have people that have befriended me that I've had arguments with in the past,
right. Okay.
It's a nice thing. So, I'd like to see a little bit more consistency and fairness in the judging. And I don't think that a lot of judges have bad intention, because you go into judging because you love the sport. But I do think that the consistency in that decision was definitely off. When someone's clearly winning every pose, like there's absolutely no question in my mind that Alex won. And that's with all due respect to all other competitors. But if you're posing at that level and other competitors aren't, like Alex was probably one of the best posers on that stage. Mm-hmm. Like that's not questionable, without putting down anyone else. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just going to talk about Alex, because otherwise it's just like I'm shitting on other competitors, which is something that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
If you've got a complete physique, Alex doesn't have a weak body part. So if you look at her physique in the front pose, you can't say that she's lacking calves. You can't say that she's lacking quads. You can't say she hasn't got a small waist. Her waist is just as small as anyone else and has probably the best taper out of the whole lineup. Another person who's got a really good taper is probably Claire. Claire's got a really very good taper in that lineup too. But outside of Claire, she's probably got the best V taper in that whole lineup and has the most complete development. She's not missing a body part, posed very well, was in condition. And all I needed to say is that, and then look at the other competitors and say, did any other competitors have weak body parts? Did any other competitors pose as well as Alex? Does any of the other competitors have complete development like Alex? The answer is no. So what the fuck happened? So that's the way that I look at it.
So you're gunning for retribution at a future Aussie Pro show then, where Alex will come in on top then, you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not just Alex. The thing about me is that I also plan, I'm not like all in on Alex, the Alex train. I'm all in on all my competitors. I set them up for success. So I'm planning for a few other competitors. Like for example, Nicole Tan's going to be doing that pro. She's going to be very, very dangerous. Like if you put Nicole Tan in that national lineup, she's automatic top 3. There's no question about it. So because she brings the conditioning, she's got the posing. I feel like if you're posing like a professional and you're standing on stage, not just in your routine, but when you're standing on the side, that needs to be rewarded. It's like if you watch the Olympia, right? Big Ramy, he was like a fucking statue posing at all times. He didn't like gasp between transitions. He wasn't dying. Like he just looked like he was just dominating the stage. He isn't technically the best poser in terms of, how he transitions, but he had the best posing conditioning. He did not move. He looked like a professional, and he won based on that because he had aggression in posing. That's exactly what Alex did. She was like a statue. She was holding that front pose all day long, did not look like a professional. She was one of the competitors, and Steph was a very good poser as well. Like Steph was very, very aggressive in her posing. And that's something that I coach my girls to have. You see a Team Destroy girl walk out, you're like, oh fuck, it's one of those bitches. Like because I am so anal about presentation. I look at everything. It's not just building symmetry, proportion, and flow. I want my ladies to have the competitive advantage. I want them to murder everyone on stage. If you look back at the footage, Steph came out and she was just like, I'm here to fuck everyone up. That's what the exact look on her face was. Her competitive nature, and obviously I'm very competitive, so I try to push that on these ladies, but Steph's very competitive anyway. But that's exactly what I'm saying. So when you've got the complete package, and you're posing like that, that needs to be rewarded. When you're not posing and you don't look like you want to be there and you've got missing body parts and you're out of condition, come on. That's just not how it is. I mean, from a bodybuilding point of view, we can see when someone doesn't have hamstrings or doesn't have quads, like, oh, they look a bit top heavy. Or you're like, oh, that person's holding a bit of water. Their transitions and their posing's not as nice as the other person. You make it a comparison, you can see that from a mile away. So I view things from that same lens as well. And I can see when someone poses very well, when they're out of condition in transitions, or they're not holding their stomach in, or if they're not smiling. I look at every last detail and I think if for example, one of my competitors was very much slouching when they were posing, I would lose my shit. I'd be like, you know what? You lost the show because your posing sucked. Like that was terrible.
Yeah. Okay.
But when it's the other way around and you've got a competitor or competitors that are posing at a high level and someone else is posing not to that level, it's quite questionable when conditioning isn't there. That's like, you haven't got the condition and you're not posing well. Okay, I can't agree with that decision. That's retarded.
Okay. Well, I'll have to go back and look at the the photos, because it's been a while. It's been about 6 or 8 weeks since then, maybe. So I definitely can't remember. I can just remember seeing the thing. I think I actually seen it on your story where you were questioning it, and that's probably what's stuck in my mind more than the actual pictures that I seen at the time.
Yeah, I try not to go into too much because it's not about other athletes. Like if you win a show and if I, for example, disagree with it, that's not your fault as an athlete.
Yeah.
I'm not putting down any athletes. I'm just simply saying, because if this was, for example, the Olympia, this is where people need to like understand political correctness. If Phil Heath wins the Olympia and he's got a gut, we're all saying Phil Heath's got a gut. How the fuck did he win the Olympia? We're not picking on him and going, he's such a bad person, all this shit. This is bodybuilding. This is bikini. Yeah. We're meant to judge the physiques on stage. And if someone's out of condition and not posing because Phil Heath's gut's hanging out, why can't I say the exact same thing about a competitor who isn't posing to that level, who isn't in condition? It's not about, bullying anyone. It's about judging and seeing things from the judge's point of view and commenting that as a coach. Because if that was my competitor, or if any of my competitors were at that standard, like that Phil Heath at the Olympia, when everyone's like, he's got a gut, then obviously we need to talk about it. We can't shy away from the issues because it's bikini. It's like, no, we need to talk about these things.
Yeah, okay, fair, mate. And Troy, I think we've covered a lot there, buddy. So we've been on for nearly an hour, roughly. So what's your Instagram if people don't follow you and want to find out more about bikini and the sort of posts that you're putting out there, or want to check out your team?
Yeah, that's cool. You can just follow me at Troy J Thornton and send me a DM, and if you want to ask any questions, if you want even me to analyze your physique, I can tell you, hey, look, I think you should bring up this and train your quads 3 times a week, or train your glutes a little bit more, whatever it is. So definitely hit me up, send me a message. I'll reply to everyone, do my best to respond as quick as I can, and yeah, we can go from there.
Nice. So this has been episode 3 of season 2 of the O Show. So this will be up in a couple of weeks' time, sort of early May. Thank you for coming on, Troy. I'm going to urge everyone, if you've enjoyed this, to please take a screenshot now and tag both of us so that we know that this has went down pretty well. And maybe Troy will come back on and answer any more questions, or if there's anything he's spoke about that you want more info about, either DM me and we can maybe get a follow-up, or message Troy directly and we can he'll obviously answer. Like he said, he does the DMs in style there. And yeah, Troy, thank you for your time, buddy. I know you're busy and it's late there as well, so I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of The O Show. If you know somebody who needs to hear this episode today, please share this with them via message or on social media. Don't forget to also take a screenshot and share it on your story and tag me at Odhran McCarry so we can continue to grow the podcast and help more people change their lives with the advice given here. Also, keep the 5-star reviews coming over on iTunes, as that helps people who normally wouldn't listen to the show find it and get the O Show in their ears and drive the podcast forward to help more people around the world with the advice here. Have a great day, and I will speak to you soon.